Okay, aloha everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Next Steps program. Um, before I introduce our speaker, I just want to mention a couple of upcoming events. On April 16th, we will have uh, legal information for librarians with speakers Brian Huffman and Jane Gagne, who are both law librarians. And then on May 30th, the HLA spring meeting will take place, and the registration information for those events is forthcoming. So today it is my great pleasure to introduce Ralph Toyama. He is the Systems Librarian at Leeward Community College. He has a BA in biology and an MLIS from the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa. And he's a technology hobbyist and an emergency management reservist. And I know that he was activated during the most recent storm. So thank you for volunteering for a long, long time with the emergency management um, and civil defense. He's also a motorcyclist and a self-taught online accessibility specialist. So he's going to share with us some of what he has learned. So please take it away, Ralph.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Or yeah, this afternoon. Good noon. Um, it's, yeah, last weekend was wild, and it's raining where I'm at now. So fingers crossed. Yeah. So today I'm gonna do something a little bit differently than what I've been doing at the HLA conferences the past couple of years. Instead of trying to cram everything into 1 or 2 hour half long sessions, I'm going to mostly focus on one aspect of accessibility. Um, and that I'm going to be talking about semantic markup, and I'll explain what that is shortly. Um, the button. Oh, so I've been in lieu of a handout or a slide deck, I've been maintaining a LibGuide of accessibility off of the LibGuide thing at work. So that's the URL, or if you can find it if you search our guides. So I discuss a lot of the concepts, or some of the concepts I'm going to be talking about today, links to other good information sites, and some guidance on steps you can take. Uh, so why did I become like a self-taught accessibility specialist? Uh, Mainly, it's because as librarians, our websites are our service delivery platforms, and they're teaching tools for us. So it's really important for us to be able to control our own online presence. Uh, but a lot of us are part of organizations where there are people above us who may not think we should be controlling our online presence. There are some places where the powers that be say, tell us what you want on your website and we will put it up for you. And that's okay if all you're putting up is information about your services and your policies, but we use it to deliver our services. So that's um not a good position to be in. And if we were like instructors, instructional faculty, it'd be a lot easier to make the argument that we should be able to control our own online stuff. But it's harder for us, so we need to really be able to make the argument that we're able to take care of our own issues. We're not gonna uh, get get the college sued, and so yeah, that's why I kind of started down this path to learn how to actually uh, do this, hardcore. Uh, and schools, I think, are especially are high profile targets for complaints because there are so many, you know, the creation of web documents and stuff is so distributed among different people who don't have the expertise to do this. So that's why I do this. Um, Take a moment to talk about the applicable laws that govern you know, make us be compliant. I think the most important one for most of us is actually an older law. It's Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. as amended. It's been updated many, many times over the years. And it applies to any organization that receives federal funds. And by federal funds, that means grants and student financial aid. So really practically every publicly funded library somehow either gets some kind of grant money or they're part of a larger institution that gets some kind of support. So just about all of us are uh, required by this law not to discriminate, and our websites are included in that mandate. Um, what's the specific standard for being accessible? I'm going to skip ahead to one slide for just a second. That's the WCAG 2.1 AA Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Um, 2.1 is like the latest actual working version of that. Talk about that in a second. Just look back one slide. If you're part of the University of Hawaii, there already was a complaint that we had to respond to. So if you're part of the UH, there's as of 2018, an agreement that we have to comply with that requires us to comply with WCAG 2.1 AA. Now, a lot of you are probably also aware that a change to Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act is about to go into effect for uh, most larger governments, larger than population larger than 50,000, I believe, is the number. Um, didn't pay close attention to the number because we're much bigger than that. So that's going to apply to state and local government agencies. This new law taking effect is, for most of us, redundant because we are already covered by Section 504. So if you are not already compliant, and being compliant means WCAG 2.1 AA, I wouldn't worry about April. I would worry about right now because that mandate has been in effect for us for a long, long time. I think last year it actually got formally amended to 2.1. It used to be 2.0. So yeah, so get on it if you're not already there. So yeah, so Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA. AA. So there's single A, double A, triple A. Single A is like the most basic. Triple A is the strictest. Double A is like the standard that we generally have to comply with. Uh, the difference between 2.0 and 2.1 mostly applies to like mobile app interfaces. So if your website was already 2.0 compliant, you probably don't have a lot to do to become 2.1 compliant. For my library's website, I just had to make a couple of buttons a bit larger. Because when you view our website on a phone, uh, there's a couple of links that are in the form of buttons, and I had to make the fonts a little bit larger. So that was all I had to do for that. But that's kind of, yeah, what you can expect there. That's next slide. Okay, so uh, I think most of us, all of us, are probably aware that people who have vision impairments use something called a screen reader to actually read out the text on the screen. Um, you probably intuitively know that computers often handle text as strings of characters. And that's why you can like copy and paste text from one application and put into a different application and use it. And so the screen reader is able to do the same. It can pick up text on the screen and actually read it out, synthesized voice. But text alone is only half the battle. On this slide, you can see on two halves, I've got a lot of words. Both halves of this illustration have the same words, but on the left side, it's probably a lot more understandable because there's a bunch of visual clues that help you see uh, how that document is organized. You can see there's a title at the top. I shouldn't be using the word title. I'll explain that. But there's a little introductory paragraph, and then you can see it's broken down into sections, and each section has a little header that tells you what each section is. And you can also see a list there that you look at that and say, oh, that's a list of steps I have to follow. Those are all like visual clues that help the sighted person understand the document. Those visual clues are not available to anybody who is depending on a screen reader to uh, get the content off of a page. So that brings us to semantic markup. So what you have to do to address that situation is that you have to tag the different parts of your document with the function that those parts of the document fulfill so that the screen reader is able to give like audible cues when it reads out the page so that the person, tells you it'll tell the listener what the headings are and what the lists are and things like that. So the the main things that you have to worry about are the headings and the subheadings. Um, Paragraphs, you don't really have to worry about paragraphs because they take care of themselves. Lists, I'll explain that more. Parts of a table, tables are a pain in the butt, but you gotta pay attention to that too. We'll go into detail for all of that. So headings. Headings are hierarchical. Uh, it'll be like a heading one or a level one, or if you're working on a web page, that's the H1 tags. That's going to be the main heading for your web page or your document. Uh, the level two headings are like subheadings that divide up your document into the major sections. And then, and if you need to further divide those sections, you can do level three, level four, whatever. Um, HTML actually goes down to H6. I would question your life choices if you're actually going down to H6. You should probably rewrite your content to organize it differently. But anyway, that option is there. Paragraphs, I say they will usually take care of themselves because your word processor or your web authoring tool will just assume that unless you're saying something isn't a paragraph, it's just going to tag it as a paragraph. So don't worry about paragraphs. They will take care of themselves. Lists. The reason you want to mark your lists, well, what the screen reader will do when it reads a list is it'll say, it'll tell the listener that it's about to read a list. It'll tell them how many list items to expect to hear. It's gonna say list item and then read out first list item, and it'll read out the next list item until it, excuse me, reaches the end of the list, and it'll tell the user it's reached the end of the list. Tables. I'm going to be talking mostly about web tables here. So they have a place, they have a use, and you should only use tables to communicate tabular data. A lot of us who've been designing web pages for a while probably adopted a bad habit of using tables as a layout tool. Right? So if you want stuff on your web page to be arranged in a certain way, a really easy way to do that would be to create a table, make all the borders invisible, and then you stick whatever into each of the cells because that would lock it into a grid. Bad practice, don't do it. Because the screen reader is going to have to read through each of those cells and it's going to announce them each of those as uh, cell contents, and could potentially be kind of a bit confusing mess if you're having to listen to it described that way. So the most important thing about one of the most important things about creating a web table is that you have to appropriately tag the header cells. Right? So you're going to have headers at the top of your columns or headers at the beginning of your rows. And um, when you properly tag those header cells, the screen reader is going to know how to announce the row and the column labels when it reads out each of the data cells. So you're not hearing a bit of information just, in a long series of cell contents without any context. It actually, you know, tells you what each cell is supposed to, kind of information that each cell is supposed to have. Um, One other thing you should keep in mind about tables is that there's a caption tag that you put inside your table code that you put in a descriptive title for the table. There's a link on that LibGuide to the tables tutorial that's put up by the World Wide Web Consortium um, Web Accessibility Initiative that tells you how you should tag those header cells, and it gives you a whole bunch of different examples for um, you have headers at the top of the cells, headers at the side of the cells, combination, you know, uh, header above a bunch of other headers. So um, it's very good. It's very helpful. And go there for details because we would be here for hours if I tried to go over that today. Oh, and now I'm going to do a little demonstration. How am I going to do this? So, uh, so I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'm going to tell you how not to do it. Uh, don't. So the way you don't do it is you don't just do things like bolding and the font and the color and size and that to make your headings look different. What you should be doing is using the tools in your word processor or your authoring interface to apply these styles to the things that you want to tag. Let me jump over. Okay, that worked. So I've got a sample document that's a big mess of text here. Um, this is how I want it to look. So, I started with my main heading, or the title to my document essentially. So I'm gonna highlight that, and under the styles menu here, it says normal text. Now I'm gonna say heading 1. And now that has been tagged as a heading. This I intended to be a subheading to divide up the document. I'm gonna say this is heading 2. Oh, trying to pardon me while I try to find something in the sea of text here. This is another subheading. Now, remember I said headings are hierarchical, so this is also heading 2 because this is one level down below from the main heading. You may have noticed there's also a title style. This is actually intended for like a title page. So if you have a really long document, that's when you would be using uh, the title style. So for like just a simple document, we're going to start with heading 1. Mm. Oh, I had a list here. I intended these to be items in a list, so I'm going to highlight the whole thing. And over here, there's a bunch of, where is it? This is the one. So I wanted a bulleted list. If I were giving steps to a procedure, I might choose to do a numbered list, but I'm just gonna say bulleted list. And here the thing not to do is to tab to indent and put in a character that you want to use as your bullet character and then type the thing, because that's all going to be read out as just a long line of text. Or, well, a bunch of paragraphs, I think, actually is how it would be read out, but, just the same. Um, so now these headings in this list are tagged, but they're kind of ugly, right? So um, I'm not happy with the way it looks. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this again and say, oh, gosh. Let me make that a little bit smaller. I'll make it bold. I'll center it. It looks nicer that way. This one is still a little bit too big for my taste. I'll bold that. It's okay along the left side. So now it looks more like how I want it to look, but I don't want to have to keep doing this all the way down the document. So what I'm going to do now is go back to the style. I want to make, I'm going to update the heading to style to match what I just did here. And now you can see this second time that I used heading 2, it now matches the first time. So not only is this the proper way to tag a document, it's also easier because I don't have to keep doing this every time. Every time I use that heading, I just make it match what I just entered, and now all the headings look that way. All the H2 headings look that way. Let me jump back to the presentation. View slideshow. Yes, I said all that now. Oh, yes. So, as I mentioned earlier, uh, that title style is for a title page, and if you're working on a web page, the title tag is actually for the text that appears up in the browser tab. So it's not your it's not your page title. It's actually it's the file title. Oh, forms on a web page is something you have to also be careful of. Uh, if you've if you've run an accessibility check on your page, you might have had the nightmare of seeing an error pop up for an unlabeled form control. So the deal with forms, um, and by forms I mean blanks that you fill in stuff or check boxes or buttons that you click on, things like that. Forms are often laid out so that the labels follow the control of the labels follow the control. So like a checkbox, and then there's a sentence or a phrase explaining what that checkbox is. So the label is actually going to be read out after the thing that you're expected to take an action on. So to address this problem, what you're supposed to do is make sure that each form control has a label that's associated with each other. And that way the screen reader is able to also properly announce the labels for each form control. And the way you do that is you can assign a unique name to the individual controls or to the labels, depending on your circumstances. And then you can add attributes to the HTML text to uh, link the two together. And I will explain that in about 3 slides, maybe 4 slides, I forget. And so now I'm going to take a really brief detour to explain in about 3 slides how a web page actually works. Why am I going to do this? Uh, One is to take away the mysteriousness about how web pages work. I also want to take away the scariness of of editing web pages. And the reason I want to make it less scary is that sometimes the easiest and or the most effective way to deal with an accessibility problem is to go and directly edit the HTML code. What is HTML? What is a web page? So a web page is rendered by the web browser from an HTML file. HTML files are made up entirely of text characters, vis mostly visible text characters, handful of special control characters like the carriage return, when you hit the enter key and the cursor goes back to the beginning of the next line. That's all part of a text file. The fun thing about HTML files is that the markup tags are actually part of the text. They're in text, they're interspersed with the content text. You can actually see them. They're not only human viewable, you can kind of read them. You've got to get used to it a little bit, but you can actually look at it and understand what it's doing. Uh, so any web authoring tool is going to have an HTML editing mode that you can look at that. You can even take a basic text editor like Notepad and open up an HTML file and actually see all of the tags inside the document. Um, for example, an H2 second level heading is going to be like H2, then your heading, and /H2 is the closing tag. And that's how the browser knows that that line of text is an H2 heading. CSS, cascading style sheets, it's another kind of plain text code. It controls the appearance of the things on your web page. I said controls text, it controls a lot of things, but you can specify things like font size, positioning, the color, background, color imaging, things like that. Um, you can add, pardon me, you can add CSS codes directly to HTML text to control a specific line of text or a block of text. You can put it in a section of your HTML file so that the whole page can use that code. You can even put it into a separate style sheet file and put a link from your HTML file to that style sheet. And that's a really useful way of controlling a whole bunch of pages. So you only have to make one style sheet and link a bunch of different pages to that. In practice, how does that work? Um, say you want your H2 headings to look a particular way. In your style sheet, you would put those specify your font and size and color and all that. Then in your HTML file, you would just put those opening and closing H2 tags, your opening and closing tags, uh, around the text that you want to be your header, and the browser will take it from there. It'll display the heading with that look that you wanted. Um, so again, I didn't have to, put all those commands for every time I use that heading. I just say I want my H2 text to look like this, and every time I use the H2 text, it will look like that. One more slide on HTML. So ARIA is a set of attributes. It's like an extension to HTML that you can use with HTML. And they use it to address accessibility issues that regular HTML just doesn't handle well, was never designed to handle. So a couple of slides ago, when I was talking about tagging form controls, yeah, so you identify a label or you create a label or you find it, yeah. And then you can use ARIA attributes to in the HTML text to say, this thing is a label for that thing over there. Or you can say that thing over there is the label for this. And that's how you tie your labels and your form controls together. Google apps are a pain in the neck for accessibility. Um, they try. They're definitely trying to make it accessible, but it always it used to always throw up a whole bunch of errors every time I did that, and now the last couple of times I've tried to use the wave checker, accessibility checker, it doesn't even get to the content to analyze. It just throws up a bunch of question marks. Uh, Google Doc, when you're viewing a Google Doc in with a screen reader, it's not only describing the page contents, but the interface, the Google Docs interface. So what I recommend if you're going to put up a document for public viewing is that you take that Google Doc and turn it into an accessible PDF. The way that I found it works is from Google Docs, you export that document as a Word file, open it in Word, run their accessibility utilities, save that file as a PDF, uh, open that PDF in Acrobat, the Pro version. What do they call it? They call it Pro version. Anyway. But it has its own, it's going to be like 90% good. But when you open it up in Acrobat, it's going to ask you to take one more look, make sure the reading order is okay, so that, it's usually okay. And there's like one or two more tweaks that you can make. And then you save it, and then you're going to have an accessible PDF file. And it's a lot easier, to make something available for public viewing. So what I'm not going to go into detail today is about alternative text, which I think most of us or all of us have already heard of or already aware of. Like if you have an image that you want to put on your web page, you have to give alternative text so that the screen reader can describe what it is. But what I'm going to say today is that I've seen a lot of people go way overboard with giving details in alternative text. It's like they're trying to like paint a picture with words so you can imagine in your mind what it looks like. So you got these really long, detailed, and ultimately not that helpful descriptions of the image. So focus on the information that you want to convey. Um, you may, when you think about what that image does, you may conclude that it really doesn't do anything. It may be a decorative image, or it may be redundant because the thing that you wanted to communicate is already explained on your the text that accompanied that image. So you could you could mark it in a way that the screen reader ignores it. It doesn't even acknowledge that it's there. Kind of saves the time of the listener by not even bringing it up. So in HTML, the way you do that is you give it an empty alt attribute, alt equals, and then you have two double quotes, empty. Uh, PDF, the term they use for that is to call it an artifact. And I'm going to refer you to WebAIM's uh, alternative text article, which I've also linked to in the LibGuide, that gives a really nice discussion about the level of detail that you should be giving, and everything depends on what it is that you really want to um, convey. And it's kind of why you can't, it's hard to automate accessibility because a lot depends on the intent of the creator. I think that's all I had. Okay. So for web accessibility, so if you want to check your web pages, um, the Wave tool uh, is one that I use a lot. It's really easy. It's available as a browser extension, so I can just click on a thing on my browser and it gives me a report. There are other testing tools. University of Hawaii for, if you're associated with the university, they got a lot of tools that you can use. You can try to use an actual screen reader to see how it sounds. Uh, NVDA is free, comes out of New Zealand, I believe. They do accept donations, and please do consider donating to them to keep their project going if you download it. JAWS is like the gold standard screen reader, but they do not have like a developer's version. They expect you to pay for it if you want to use it, even if, just to check your pages. So the University of Hawaii is also because they're also under pressure to make their content accessible. They've also made got a site a university-wide site license. But if you want to do that, there's a steep learning curve. I'm still trying to learn it. But yeah, so that's what I do. Mostly the wave check is what I do. And my voice is giving out, and I've been talking for, oh my God, I've been talking for 20 minutes. So, there once again is my that that guide where I try to keep up to date with everything I talk about during these presentations. So, are there any questions this time?
Thank you so much, Ralph. That was a fantastic presentation with lots of great information, and I really appreciate your LibGuide. I did put a link to it in the chat, along with links to some of the other things that you talked about. And so I encourage all of our viewers to take a look at Ralph's guide because it's really packed with great information and examples of how to code things and so forth. So thank you for all of your effort in putting that together, Ralph.
Oh, my pleasure.
Does any,
Keeps me sharp if I have to keep um reviewing this every so often.
yeah, thank you. Are there any questions? You can feel free to unmute, or if you can't unmute, your question in the chat. Okay, I have a question while everybody is thinking of their own questions. Um, do you have any advice for a best way to do things like interactive maps? You know, a lot of times we have interactive maps where you click on something and then there's something that pops up. So is there a way to make that type of content more accessible?
Oh, those are a huge pain in the butt. Uh, for, for those, what I usually, if I'm in that, what have I done? I've actually had like uh, separate documents, like an actual simple web page, text-only web page that describes what's on that map. Because otherwise, it's a nightmare. Yeah. Oh gosh, do I have any? Trying to think if I have any ex currently posted examples of it. I know I think somewhere in that LibGuide I may have mentioned a an infographic that infographics used to be really popular among the librarians at my library, and it's kind of fallen out of favor, and I am so glad that it has because those are a huge pain. But yeah, for those, I actually had like a little link at the bottom of the infographic that opens up just a plain web page, just text explaining what's on that thing. And that's sometimes I know it's not maybe not the most elegant solution, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, what I've heard, what I learned at a webinar that was specifically about accessibility in OER resources was that you can use AI to describe the things in infographics. So if you have some kind of a resource, whether it's a LibGuide, an OER textbook, or something else that has a lot of infographics, you can just have your AI system describe the content, and then you can take that and make that into your text description so that you don't have to spend time doing that work.
Yeah, better than nothing. I probably have seen examples of that. Um, but as we all know with AI, how much the time you save utilizing AI is balanced out by the time you spent proofreading it and correcting its mistakes.
Yeah, I guess the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who else has a question?
Hi, Ralph. I have a question. This is Ellen.
Right.
Um, I had been working with our IT to update our website, and some of the materials that we wanted to put online are archival documents that we have rights to do so, like public domain kind of things. And so it's difficult because a lot of it is like handwritten or very difficult for machine readable copies to copy and paste onto a web page. So, um, my strategy was then to just keep the PDF version of that scan and upload it to DSpace. Do you have any understanding of like, does DSpace follow the accessibility policies, especially for documents like archival materials?
I don't know the specific answer to that. I think well, I think libraries are in a tough spot because we do have to handle all these kinds of uh you know old content. Um the it seems like each of the whenever you read up on like the regulations that we're supposed to follow, there's always like a carve out for stuff that just proves to be so difficult to deal with that if you were to like just not offer it, you wouldn't be fulfilling your overall mission. And so you can, just do the best that you can. And I think whoever writes these regulations recognize that there are situations that are just like so far off to the side of the bell curve that they had to put those exceptions and and libraries just happen to fall into that far end of the bell curve when it comes to stuff like that. So I I oh gosh. Ah, should I be giving advice like this? I tend to think as long as we give a good faith effort, um, how hard are people going to come after us?
I think I've also heard of people just putting some kind of statement on their site that says, if you need this in another format, let us know and we will fix it. And we certainly do that with our videos, that they don't all have captions, but if somebody wants captions, we'll just produce it for that one video. I don't know, that's not a perfect solution, but at least, you know,
It's a solution.
yeah.
I think it's a good faith uh attempt to address that particular problem.
Okay, other questions? Well, while we're waiting, I just want to say that when I was in library school, I took a basic HTML class that Steph Dunabeer taught. She used to work at KCC, and it was great. It wasn't super in-depth, but it was enough so that I learned HTML well enough so that I could do something like edit a libguide and fix a problem with a libguide, which you often, surprisingly, need to do. So I certainly would advocate just taking or watch some basic HTML instructional video, and that will help you to feel more confident with HTML if it's not something that you're already familiar with.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think one of the challenges with using any kind of web authoring tool is uh, whoever designed it, or it's not designed to maybe take their best guess at what you meant to be doing, and sometimes the guess is wrong, or sometimes it just puts a whole bunch of needless superfluous code just to sort of up come close to what you probably meant to do in the first place. So yeah, sometimes to fix stuff you just got to go in and edit code. Like the forms thing, yeah. I mean, how do you fix like a missing label? Just got to go in and like find a label, manually put alter the text so that the code and the label and the control are linked, and that's how do you automate that? It's, they don't. You just got to do it manual.
Okay, are there any other questions? Hearing none.
I guess I have a question. Hi Ralph, thank you so much for putting on your session today. And I was just curious because like for PDFs and making them accessible, I currently use like Adobe Acrobat. But I was just curious, is that also what you're doing to do PDF accessibility, or do you have other tools that you might recommend?
No, I'm just using Adobe Acrobat. What was it? What they call it? Trying to remember what is it? Is it Acrobat Pro? Uh,
Yeah, I believe so. I think UH we get a license through them now, right? Like so I've
yeah,
been using that, but I was just curious if you knew any other tricks or tips.
yeah. That's what I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have a final question? Well, I'm sure that Ralph would be happy to answer additional questions if something crops up in your mind later on. But I would like to thank Ralph very much for doing the session today. That was really terrific, and I really do appreciate your accessibility guide. I think that it's a marvelous thing. So thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for attending today's session. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.